matriarch of the Bottoms clan with her 4 spectacular sons, Tim, Joe, Sam, and Ben sitting on the other side over there. And we're in Twentynine Palms, not very far from Joshua Tree Park, National Park. And the bombs are going off across. You can hear they actually, there's a military base and they do testing and all kinds of shootouts and breaking into villages and so on and so forth. So we're going to talk about the things that Ben did here. I'd just like you to mention a little bit about what you think about your son's work. It's really quite amazing. Just everywhere there are things that he's done, including paintings, arrangements of plants, sculptural things, things that come out of Japanese woodwork, all kinds of things that are everywhere on this property, and they're really treasures. And you've been here for how many years, Ben?
Well, my parents bought it in 1955, and I started coming out here. Ben first came, he was born in the end of 60, so sometime in 1961, he made his first journey here.
And what the hell has he done with this place?
Well, when my father died, and my mother came up to live with us in Santa Barbara, but had this place, and Ben would come down here, and he said, why didn't, both Ben and Sam said, Mom, why don't you buy Grandma's place? So I didn't know what to do with it exactly, or why I'd want it, except it was a compound, more than one person.
Like the Kennedy
Hyannisport, yeah. And so
it's got 5 different buildings.
He said, I like it, and I thought, and he said,
We're by the way, we're in Ben's place right now.
Yeah, where my parents had lived, and my little brother and sister. And I just said, why not? Because I had sold my big house in Santa Barbara, why not? And so I still stayed in Santa Barbara too, and Ben would come down here. And so I just said, what I liked that I was able to say is, you could do anything you want, because it was as if I was the big person now, and I could let them do whatever they want, whereas my dad would say, no, you kids, don't move those. Now, or my mother would want to let them play here, and then my dad would say, no, that's silly, you don't do things like that. Well, now, my mother was not that well, my dad was dead, I could do anything I want, I could let them do anything they wanted. And I think it was very much appreciated, but I meant it from deep down, just so I had a little place to stay when I was here. And Ben chose this house.
It's magnificent what is here. I mean, I'm looking at this magnificent painting by the fireplace that shows me that your son could have been a really brilliant architect, because he has this marvelous sense of space. But what he's done here is way beyond architecture.
Evolved in the 20 years I've been here, which is in such high contrast to the natural beauty of the desert. And, it is pretty radical. What moved in next door the year we bought the property? And basically it is that human's hand, or human needs of cars and plastic and all this stuff, that prompted me to say, well, if they can put an atonement yard next door, I guess we could put a motel sign in the yard. And so I did. And that began this collecting of these signs. And my brother Sam, who's now passed away, says, well, Ben, you can't just have one, you got to have 29. 29 palms. There you have it. So anyway, what I did 3 years ago was I just said, I'm tying all these plants up. So I completely changed their shape. And then I rented a Bobcat, which is a tractor, and I started grading and creating these pockets, as you'll see down in here. This was just this alluvial fan off Donnell Hill, right? So it was just a hill slope that I've cut in between. And by tying the plants up, I was then able to get the tractor in certain places that I couldn't have gotten otherwise. So I spared, most all the plants And I hadn't really thought about it when I went to tithe. So you can tell also by lowering the grade here, it raises the plant. So I've lowered the grade here by 2 feet, and then by tying the plant, which would have been at this height, it is now twice as tall. So now you can't see the house there. You can't see the tow yard or the recycle facility. All you see is sky and these shapes and these characters that are evolving in front of us using found objects. It's about shape and form, shade, making more shade. You would not have had this amount of shade here before. Now I've created shade. Collected all of these signs which are all part of, desert vernacular, the Roundup Room and the Josh Lounge, and these were all institutions that were boarded up or going to be burned down, and I thought, oh, well, let's give them a place to come live. People wonder why I put posts in the ground, and I do at other places where I'm gardening, and I have them as markers. I'll have verticals, they're markers. It's kind of like making a scratch mark on a piece of paper where you're going to build a fence or something. It's a distance tool that I use. And here I've taken, and it's ongoing, it's continual. So this plant would have been a loose shaped round thing. I'm tying it and I'm shaping it, and I'm tying it into and giving it has its own form. I'm pushing it to go where it wants to go, but also where I may want where it goes within the environment that I've cut around it, and how it will evolve and create shade and form. Secondary to that, then because I have jojoba plants that are now propagating, I poke in the seeds in different places, and if these plants want to grow here, fine. The wire around it is to protect the bases of the trees and the small plants from rabbits. So that's what these bases are about. And then just all the layering of all these little pieces of wood. How far can I go? How far can I go? This is dried Loretta wood. Here, this mesquite tree I planted. This is in the ground 10, 11 years. Wonderful mesquite trees. Best for shade in the desert. Great. The leaves will get only thicker as the summer comes on and it gets warm. But you can see here I've grabbed it and I've pulled it in here and it's tied into these lorea. I also have this armature or structure that I've been using. These with the more whimsical theatrical shapes are palm blossoms off the Washingtonias, which are the native fan palms. They add this striking level of contrast. The work has evolved as, I could create a character or they could just be patterns. And as the materials come into my hand, I continue to push and shape and get these. They're just big paintings or flats or sculptures. So again, this would have been grade. Years ago you would have been standing up here, but the plant, I would have been at this height, and the plants would have only been this tall. They're twice as tall now. They have this Fabergé egg thing that is evolving and shaping here. I can move away from you now and you hardly see me. Here is majestic, and I think that this is a most majestic garden I have ever been in my life, and I just happen to have these lettuce. So this is majestic. reminds me of seagrass, this garden here. All of the little tentacles and arms. And a friend came in and she says it's very theatrical. She thought it was highly theatrical. I love watching birds fly through here because they will choose to use the doorway rather than fly over. To me, that is sensational. To watch a bird come along here, go, pretty great. Some places have gone so far as to say, I found this piece of screen. I actually dug all this stuff up right here. I was digging back here, and I found the trash from when they were building this house. So I just left it. That's an archaeological dig. I mean, here's like an old turning light from a car, you know, a one-panel turning light with the arrows in it, and the Acme beer, and the old sort of Fiesta wear and stuff like that. Old lamp. Lady's shoe, lots of cans, beer bottles. Because right here, they just threw it over the wall and buried it. And so I just picked the screen up and I said, well, I wonder what this would be like to integrate this panel. And it made me think of an artist by the name of Bruce Conner, whose work I saw at UCLA on exhibit one time, and he used a lot of screens and kind of that Joseph Cornell assemblage thing. Screens, he'd put them over little baby dolls and things like that. He was used stockings. So it's the Japanese sort of influence of that screen where it lets certain things through, but just adds one more layer of distance. And I have the freedom to do that here. And I'm not censored. Nobody says you can't do it. Good dog. Good dog. God, dog. Good dog. Good dog. God. God. Good dog. Good dog. God. Good dog. So here, for example, a few years ago, I would have come out here and the neighboring property might have been driving their car towards the house at night and shining the headlights into the house. And so by going down, as I did, 4 feet, and then stacking those straw bales up there, I've created this buffer which not only protects sound, light, creates this private patio. So that's very pleasing to me. I mean, my car is parked over there. You can't even see my car. All that's important is art and cocktails. And the American flag. So you can see the contrast. I'm just standing back where we were out to here, and you have this completely different feeling by virtue of just the plants being tied. Here I'm on a rake stage, very exposed, and that's my view shed, which if we went down to section C, you can see I've decorated the fence to complement the background of what's on the opposite side of the fence. It's, you know, it's just a place to hang screens and stuff and play with trash. Let's go over here into the planted garden. Even these oleander are tied. They were 5 feet shorter, and then I just tied them up and I enforced it all with wood in there. Just got the pieces of old 2x4 and laid them up off the ground and then shaped them into these different arches. everything, Joseph Cornell says, everything can be used. How will we know how one thing will affect another? These are palm, I call them shoes of the frond, the palm frond. This is the base that attaches. So, again, freedom to experiment, making just these kind of flower-shaped things that they've been hanging there for a few years, and yeah, they will decay and they'll rot, but it's all based. I've stuck a T-post in the ground and wrapped it up. My brother Joe started these cactus here, this golden barrel, about 35 years ago. Not here, it was in Santa Barbara, but he started them from thumb sizers, so I have a few of the collection around in home. There's the 4 little bottoms boys. There's Tim, Josephine, and Ben, the little baby ones, and the big mama cactus. Anyway, so my brother Joe started those. And I think I've got about 5 of them here. He had 100. This one is actually quite extraordinary because I haven't been here for months. And this particular piece, last time I was here, none of this growth was here. So the wood portion was what you noticed. And I even went so far in the experimenting with the materials and even some root materials around this teddy bear cholla, Begalovi cholla. So again, as an artist, I'm experimenting. Why can't I just wrap it around, see what will happen? But the thing that I find striking and really exciting here is this plant has been just sort of hanging along for decades. And I'm seeing all this new, incredible life and growth coming out of it. I don't know where it comes from. It's got to be from up there. It's magic. This was like a teapot and a chicken. Somehow it's like a chicken. So again, it's not that the plants aren't beautiful in their own right, on their own. It's just that this plant would have been more open and loose, and because I'm at the pool often, I don't need to see cars coming around the corner or the street light. So I tied it in such a way that it's much denser here, so if I stand behind it, for example, you see less of me than you would if the plant were in its natural state. That's ultimately where they should be, but I've tied it flat, and this one, you don't see so much of the road, now you see the plant. And then I started doing wings. You could learn you could do wings. So again, this plant would have been loose, heading out towards the road and heading this way, and I pulled it, tied it, so that it's only about that wide now. And it also is creating an arch and reaching over and touching with this one. And they're very happy. They're very happy here. And even if you did nothing, walk away for 50 years, it's going to, it will be okay. Oh, look at this charming old desert cottage in the woods. Pretty sweet, huh? This, I think, turned out to be fairly successful. I planted this garden. This whole area was just flat. You looked out there and all you saw was a road. So I bumped that up here, and I put that concrete in, and I hand-built that fence over there. That's where I started 20 years ago. And then I started putting things in. I put these little jojobas in, and I happened to get a male and a female. And so they pollinated, and they have made children, and there's little jojobas coming out, but I've really enjoyed this arch, and how I'm shaping it that way, and adding these bits of palm frond, and making a view shed through on both sides. Got started on it anyway. That would be the house where my cousin Roscoe lives, and my cousin Luigi lives up there, and my aunt Franciano, she lives up there. And the Godfather, he lives up there, about there, Papa on the hill. This was my grandmother's purple glass garden. She had a beautiful collection of that leaded purple glass out here when we were children, and then when she got moved away the first time, before we had the fence, some people came in and broke and stole all the purple glass. Very sad. So when I came here, this was one of the first hand-dug gardens I dug. I realized I didn't need to be on that level and looking at people outside, so I went down. And that way I could stand here and not have to deal with the outside world. I could just basically put my head in the sand. Like the ostrich. But as we step away, and we'll go around to the other side and look back to where you're leaning now, you'll see that that's cactus land wall. He's gone with the wires. This one is even tied. I have tied, because I didn't have anything to brace that Lorea to, I tied it to this pepper tree across here. But the same thing, we put the fence in 20 years ago, and obviously this Lorea was there. But I managed to pull it up on both sides and get it to start to eat the fence up. But this is sort of my grandmother's, ode to my grandmother in a way. And so we've got the female bust here in the foreground. We've got this thing I made for the weed show, which is those little antebellum ladies in that basket. And then I started painting these potted cactus. So that's what my grandmother looked like. This is the tornado. This is a smoke tree. This dog was painted on what was just a bunch of this weird piece of scrap lumber that I found, and it looked to me like a growling dog, and so I painted it as such. One thought I had when I came here, what do you do in a place like this, was build a maze. Just a maze. I like English gardens, I like English mazes, and I feel that we have begun to kind of get there, you know? You can walk out here, and you sort of, you're in another world, and kind of just get lost out there. You're far away from what's happening outside the compound. So, have achieved a certain level of success there. Then, like this painting here, would be inspired by this view. We know that the Oasis sign is out there. We know that the pool is out there. It isn't that, and we know that palm tree is out there. We know that that dove actually made a nest in that flower pot, and that we know that there used to be an EL for motel up there until the L blew down. So anyway, this is a painting that I felt pretty good about, because this is how I see shadow and light in my ideal spaces. The idea that that cactus, you know, is here by the walkway. For what it's worth, that's how I want to see the world. Even putting the little palm trees in up there at the Oasis of Mara, the Twentynine Palms Inn, right over there, right next door. Here's that basket that the nested in. It actually made a nest before I put these things in here. Hung on that thing that's in the painting, and there was a flower pot here, and the dove sat here, raised its children. This is one of the first stick pieces that I did when I came to the desert, and I still like it. It was just, again, the same thing. I've just taken it to a different form in the plants. It's just these 5 different vertical pieces of wood, one finished, one more natural, an old fence post, a dowel, mounting them together, and it's things like that are really simple that kind of float my boat. Again, the birds, like birds. Here's the view of my house, the fantasy view. Out there by the flag would have been there. And I'll show you a bigger one out in the yard of that. Birds out the window. Motel side paintings. There's a view if you were at the pool. The jojoba bush would be over here, and there's the duplex out there. And what I would do with that palm tree is build a tree fort like that, with a floor on it, and then have the palm fronds on the outside. And you walk around the core of the tree, and with a drawbridge ladder that would go up into it. That would be pretty neat. Of course, the tow yard and all that are gone, and instead you've got horses standing around in your yard. But it's very pleasing, to be inside this house and then to have those windows open and just have kind of quail walking by. Pretty sweet. And it feels like the cactus are almost growing into the house. This is the kitchen where we all played cards as children with my grandmother and drank iced tea when it was too hot to be at the pool. This is where we sat with our graham cracker, and drank iced tea and played Old Maid. My grandfather sat in there, watched television. She had a board that she slid across that doorway to keep his dogs out. This was her domain, that was his domain. Can't believe that she would have like 6 children in here with her in this tiny little room. And my grandmother would come out to the pool wearing something like this. It's not been 45 minutes since you ate. You have to get out of the pool, mister. All original appliances, still working. Nice carport studio space, partially enclosed for you. Open a new window, open a new door, travel a new highway you've never been down before. This is great, having this right out here. Oh yeah. So you can see how those jojoba have grown in and made that arch now and covered this up, and now there's a tree here. Grows there, and now there's a recycle facility over there. Got that sign up. That was during the snow. Here's before the tow yard. There was a little house here that my grandfather had built down in the bottom of corner of Section C. So this is pretty much, this clothesline was right here, out in front. So you can see, from here you just turn, you basically look down to the road. Don't see it anymore. Anyway, that house Mrs. Bell died, and the house got broken into by the little homesteaders and got turned into a tow yard. And that was the first concrete that I had delivered, so that would be where the bottom gate is down there. But you can see how different it is now. It's all these highs and lows and valleys now that I've dug out. And there's where that motel sign came from, and that's where that sign came from. All material, just resources. They're just pieces of lumber that make shade, but if you need a long pole, there they are. Oh, here's a mural. Here's a good one over here. So, this is like my architectural concept. So that'd be that house over there. One thought I had is if you brought a deck out all the way over into where I have all that seagrass tying, so that you would have this area would all be shaded. Of course, solar panels upstairs, put in a patio. And over here you got the real world. I love that. Just the garbage can and the 29 palm sign right here. Just boom. That was the first motel sign, Civic Center. That was very exciting. Here's an example of a volunteer Larea. My grandfather probably, when he built the pool, he had this planter built, bringing all these sort of conventional landscape architect ideas. It never got put, nothing got put in here my whole life. You put ice cream wrappers or something in here. But this little Larea volunteered in here, which was kind of neat. And so I've just taken advantage of that spot and trained it in its little bonsai home. clips. There's the Joshua Tree National Park, the motel signs, jackknife. And a 9 from the Russian judges. Oh! These organ pipe cactus. They're enjoying a little bit of the armature here. Growing up. I think the signs look a bit better in the foreground than the other stuff. That Desert Paradise sign, you could turn it, so if you wanted to face it this way, you could do that. Jeff Shelton in Santa Barbara gave me the El Dorado sign. That was reputed to be one of the last whorehouses in Montecito on Coast Village Road, right where the Starbucks is now. Just across the street and up the hill a little bit. Sheltons are a pretty famous architect and design family from Santa Barbara.
So we're sitting here with Benjamin Bonhams, who is really the creator of this space here. Given the fact that his mom let him do basically what he wanted. And what he's done is really quite remarkable. And we have been walking around trying to record some kind of overview of what you've accomplished. But I wanted to talk a little bit about aesthetics, about why you did this, because it has so many things in it, Ben. One, just the plants themselves, the cacti, the other plants that you put through here, the found art right out of Rauschenberg, which is all over the place, and you mentioned some artists that have been influential, and also your wonderful paintings, which are incredible. I mean, they were really, really amazing. I was mentioning David Hockney, and if we could just get a shot of that painting, could we go over there and take a look at that?
Well, sure. It is lived outside, the painting, so it's beginning to fade. That's what the desert does. The desert
and you know, it adds to it, doesn't it? I mean, look at that.
Well, I suppose
it's architecture and a crashing together of the landscape, which comes right into it. And yet you put these things outside. You paint on walls. It's you have no respect for your own work. But,
right.
But you have an overview, Ben, that I'd like you to talk about. So I'll shut up.
Well, this view is based upon the actual view of the pool itself looking towards the Joshua Tree National Park and some of the signs that have been placed in the yard. But then again, there are horses standing in the shade of little barns and whatnot around. So more and more I get involved in, it's kind of like more childlike, paint more of, give myself permission to paint what I would want to see, which is a more idyllic situation and more reflective of when I came here 20 years ago, what I saw as possibility, that my imagination ran wild and I didn't understand the restrictions and the confines of what ultimately I would begin to interface with. I thought if you came to this place, which just seemed so free, and I had these childhood memories, that I could make found object art and I would be sustained and happy and all that. So I've done it, but without, so that has happened. The signs have actually shown up in the yard now. You know,
we're in 29 Palms, and your original idea was to have 29 signs, and you have an awful lot of them.
Right. There was the way it got started was I recognized, I came down here to paint. My dad gave me $1,000 and said, "Why don't you just?" I was shoeing horses at the time, and not real happy with that. Working in theater at night, and this house was available, and we didn't. The house in Santa Barbara had been sold. And I think that I was hungering for a sense of place, a sense of home, security, place where you could put furniture and have some things that weren't really a part of our growing up. We didn't have conventional like furniture. You know, you had what you found at the thrift store, and then you moved and you chucked it and you got a different mattress, sort of thing. So I think that for me, that was important, and why I wanted to be here was a sense of security, home, place, doing what you want to be able to do without somebody else saying, no, you can't. The sign evolution happened in part because next door there had been a little house that my grandfather had built for this woman who retired out here. The same year mother bought the property. The house, she dies, the woman's gone, the house gets broken into. Turns out we get a tow yard next door. So that changed. That changed the energy and the vibe. So what it is, when that happened, I thought, well, geez, I don't know what this property is supposed to be, this old auto court, but if they can put a tow yard in next door, I guess we could put a motel sign in the front yard. So Sam said, well, Ben, you can't just do one, you have to do 29. So because one of the older people says what I should do, suddenly I'm out looking for motel signs and thinking, oh, well, this is the work I'm supposed to be doing.